I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.
So the first program is the 5-3-1 4-day. So this I would say is kind of better suited for your beginner lifters, which is why it's in the beginner section in red in this sort of beginner area. Although I haven't put it in red, I put it in orange, but I'd say it's probably better suited for beginner lifters. So we got a 7-week training program here because week 4 is a deload week. We do 2 training cycles, cycle 1, cycle 2. Cycle 1 is 4 weeks, cycle 2 is 3 weeks. Okay, so there we go. Right, the first thing is you enter your 1 rep maxes, you then get your training max. I would say for the second cycle, especially if you're a beginner lifter, during this 4-week period of cycle 1, you would have probably made some strength adaptations and possibly already increased your 1 rep max. So you might want to adjust this 1 rep max to accommodate the fact that you have increased your strength in that short period of time because you're quite a beginner lifter. So you might want to increase these slightly if you feel like you have made strength gains during that time. So you might want to add another 10 pounds to the squat and the deadlift, and maybe another 5 pounds to the bench, 2.5 to the bench, and maybe for the overhead press again 2.5 kg, 5 pounds for the overhead press and the bench press. That's up to you. You have to make that decision yourself. So we do the basic Jim Wendler stuff: 3 sets of 5, 3 sets of 3, 5-3-1. That's how we do this program. Week 1, 3 sets of 5. Week 2, 3 sets of 3. Week 3, 5-3-1. That's the Jim Wendler 5-3-1 concept. So in the 4-day, we train 4 days a week: Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday and Saturday, as it says up at the top. Okay, day 1 is the Monday. Let's talk about that first. So we do our strict overhead press on this day. Now we got all our working sets. We always do working sets here, which is 40, 50, 60% of your 1 rep maxes, and you do that for 5 reps for the first 2 and 3 reps for the final warm-up set. You then do your 3 working sets in this instance as well, with the 3 sets 3 and 5-3-1, and you do 65, 75, 85 for week 1 when you do 3 sets 5. Now on the final one, as you can see, you've got the plus symbol. That's consistent throughout. That plus symbol in this instance means as many reps as possible. So chase as many reps as you can with good form and good technique. Once you've done that, we're then going to move on to the deadlift. I have included the warm-up routine right here, which is much less than the other one, because now we're going to do 5 sets of 10 at 50% for our deadlift. So for my 4-day, we do the main one, the main lift of the day, which is the 5-3-1, and then we do our secondary lift of the day, which is where we do more volume but lower intensity. So in this instance, we're doing 50% of our deadlift training max, and we're doing that for 5 sets of 10. And in this instance, you can either choose your competition deadlift. So if you're conventional deadlift, you can just conventional deadlift for 5 sets of 10. Alternatively, if you want to make this a little bit more complicated and increase the complexity of this training routine, you can maybe adjust this to something, a variation, potentially a stiff leg deadlift, snatch grip deadlift, a rack pull, something like that. So maybe if you're a more advanced lifter, this is something that you want to do. If you are stuck on what to do instead of what variations to choose, you can come to this drop list right at the end here. As you can see, we've got a list here of ideas: trap bar, rack pulls, axle bar deadlift, snatch grip, stiff leg deadlift, deficit deadlift. There's some ideas for you to play around with. And then we're going to do anywhere from 2 to 3 assistance exercises. I'll put 3 in there, but you can do just 2. And we're going to do dumbbell rows and barbell curls for 5 sets of 10, and then we're going to do lateral raises for 4 sets of 12. Now, I like to superset these 2 together, the barbell curls and the side lateral raises. Obviously, for the final set for the barbell curls, you just do that without a superset with the lateral raises, because you do 4 sets for the laterals, 5 for the barbell curl. Pretty simple, right? Right, and there we go. So Tuesday, it's the same concept. We do 3 warm-up sets for 2 sets of 5, 1 set of 3. Then we do 3 sets of 5 for the squat, same percentage. And this time we do the bench press for 5 sets of 10. Again, we do a warm-up routine, and then we do 50% of our training max for 5 sets of 10. Now, same principle applies. If you want to do a variation here, you could do close grip, floor press. You could do a JM press, a Spoddo press, pin press, banded press, axle press. There are lots of variations you could apply here. Again, if you go to that same drop list right at the end, you can choose something. Alternatively, you can just keep it just your competition bench press. Then going to do some assistance training, the leg press, the dips, and the ab rollout. None of them are supersetted. And the same principle applies for Thursday and Friday. We do 3 sets of 5 for the main lift, our first lift, in this case the deadlift on Thursday, the bench press on Friday, and then we do our 5 sets of 10 at 50% for our secondary exercise of that day. And as you can see, we do a warm-up routine and then we do our 5 sets of 10. Strict overhead press, you can do that maybe with dumbbells, you could do it with a specialty bar, you could do it with a seated strict barbell overhead press off the squat rack. Up to you how you want to approach that. And then you do your assistance exercises. And then on Friday, you squat 5 sets of 10. Again, that can be a variation on the squat. It could be a safety squat, bar squat. You could do a good morning, although I wouldn't advise that. You could do front squats. Again, I wouldn't probably advise that. It's quite complex. Anderson squats, pin squats, banded squats. There is a whole load of variations. You could do pause squats. Just choose one that you'd like to do. Alternatively, just do your competition back squat. Then you do your 3 assistance exercises. That's week 1. Sorted. Easy. Week 2, we do 3 sets of 3 as our main lift. As you can see, we do our warm-up sets. Always do that for every lift. And we do our 3 sets of 3. You can see the plus there. That implies as many reps as possible. And then you do your secondary exercises. We shall call these secondary exercises right here. Always do your warm-up. And you can either do the main competition deadlift or a variation. This time we are doing 55% of our training max for 5 sets of 10. We keep the reps game the same, 5 sets of 10. Then you do your assistance exercises, which are the same as week 1. In this instance, week 1, 2, and 3, all the same assistance exercises. In the second cycle, they change. Okay, there's nothing really much to talk about. That same principle applies for each day. You do your 3 sets of 3 and then your secondary exercise for 5 sets, 10 at 55%. And then week 3, you do 5, 3, 1 as your main lift training routine. In this instance, we do 75, 85, and 95% of our training max. On that final one, you do 95% for as many reps as you can. Now, I'm going to mention something here that I'll mention for all the programs. If you were to say to me, John, I don't know how to increase my weight for the training cycle because I don't want to chase a 1 rep max on week 4, and I don't want to do a deload week 4, then week 5 1 rep max, and then take a week off and then go back to the second cycle. So how do I know if I've made a strength adaptation? I don't know, and I don't want to chase a 1 rep max until I've finished both cycles. Well, that's a valid point. The reason why I haven't written what I'm just about to say is because, again, I wanted to explain it in person rather than writing it down, where it's open to interpretation. So if I'm only able to do one rep on that 5-3-1 for all of these exercises right here, that means that I've achieved the bare minimum, meaning for the second cycle I won't increase the weight. I'm able to do just the minimum prescribed. Probably haven't made too big of a strength adaptation. There hasn't been a lot of growth in terms of my strength in that case. If I do 2 to 3, that means that there has been a strength adaptation. In that instance, I would add a little bit to my maxes for the second cycle. Over here, for the squat and the deadlift, in that instance, I would add probably about maybe 5 pounds. Okay, so it's about 2.5 kilograms. If it's for the pressing exercises, the bench and the overhead press, maybe 1.25 kilograms, or that would be the equivalent of maybe 2 pounds, 2.2 pounds. But if I was to do more than 3 reps on that final plus 1 plus, I've made a pretty big strength adaptation. I can definitely increase my maxes for the second cycle by a lot more. In that instance, for the squat and the deadlift, I would maybe increase it by 10 pounds. That's 5 kilograms. For the overhead press and the bench press, I'd do 5 pounds, 2.5 kilograms. And there we go. That's the best. Now, I wouldn't go any higher than 5 to 10 pounds range. I've had someone say, could I add 20 pounds? No, probably not a good idea. I wouldn't advise that. So there we go. That's how you know you've made a strength adaptation. I will make note of that on my website. So if that's just gone all over your head, don't worry, it will be written on the introduction section of the spreadsheet, which I will put in after these videos, and it will be on my website. So don't stress too much about that. Then you're going to do your week 4 deload, where you do 3 sets of 5, and you only use the weight you've been doing for your warm-ups. and you do some assistance training right here. And this is just 3 sets of 15, very low intensity, slightly higher volume, but very lightweight. Cycle 2. So you either haven't added anything to these maxes, you've increased them slightly, or you've increased them more, depending on how much you achieved on that 1 plus 531 day. And as you can see, also the final thing when we go to week 3, we've actually reduced our secondary set right here, okay, to 45%. So we've taken 10% off from week 2. We're still doing 5 sets 10, but we're doing 45% of our training max. That's because we are focusing predominantly on the main exercises, the 5-3-1 section. So we don't want to be doing too much work on these secondary exercises by going, let's say, to 60% or 65% for 5 sets of 10. We run the risk of accumulating too much fatigue and exhaustion, whereby maybe come, let's say, day 2, in this instance Tuesday or whatever your routine is, you might get to the squat, and because you've done 5 sets of 10 at 45%, you might not have the energy to really set a good max on this 5-3-1 right here. So it's better to do less intensity for this week 3 and not add another 5% on. Just remember that, 45%, not 60%. And again, with this section right here on week 3, okay, you probably want to do anywhere from 8 to 10 reps. If you feel like on that final set you just want to do 8, you can do 8 reps. There we go. I will include a note in here to state that as well, just in case you forget that. Right, so we go to cycle 2. Let's continue. So it's the same thing as cycle 1. We do the same routine, 3 sets of 5, 3 sets of 3, 5-3-1. Okay, the percentages remain the same as well for both the main lift and the secondary. As you can see, for the secondary, do 50%, 55%, and 45%. That's the same. So it just runs parallel to cycle 1. The only difference now is we don't need to do the deload week, and the other difference is the fact that we might have increased these maxes slightly. Nothing else has really changed there. They're just running those the exact same as the first cycle. So once you finish that second cycle, you get to this week here, okay? So we do week 1 to week 4, cycle 1, week 5 to week 7, that's cycle 2. What should I do week 8 on the final week of the second cycle, the 4th week? So after we've done the 5-3-1. Well, you can do one or two things. You can take a week off in this section right here and run this program again. Alternatively, you might want to chase a new 1 rep max. In that instance, you can do that, and then you can take a deload week off and then come back to repeating this training routine again. So it's up to you what you can do for that week between when you finished this cycle 1 and cycle 2. You might want to take a rest week, you might want to chase a 1 rep max. Up to you what you want to do there. I'll make note of that as well, just in case you've just forgotten what I've said. So there we go, that's the 4-day routine. Let's finish that and move on to the next one. So now it's time to do the 13-week beginner program. Now, is it really a beginner program? Well, maybe not. You could do this as possibly an intermediate lifter, but possibly not an advanced elite lifter. However, it does work in 4 cycles, and cycling in these sort of training blocks is a good way to train for more advanced lifters. You get lots of opportunities to have enough volume to create a strength adaptation on a frequent basis. There's enough assistance work here to support your main lifts, your deadlift, squat, bench, overhead. So there is quite a lot of elements here that could potentially work for a more advanced lifter, but I've labelled it as a beginner program for now. So first thing, enter your 1 rep maxes up here for week 1. It's a 3-day-a-week program, which is good for some people because some people don't want to train 4 days a week. They like having more time for recovery, and reduce the training frequency. So this is a good program for those sort of people. So as always with all Jim Wendler, we do this warm-up routine where we do 40, 50, 60% of our training max. Remember, with all Wendler programs we use training maxes, not 1 rep maxes. So that's a very important thing to take into consideration. We always do that before we do our working sets. So week 1 in this instance, for cycle 1, we follow a 5-3-1. So that's 3 sets of 5, 3 sets of 3, and then 1 set of 5, 1 set of 3, and 1 set of 1. So that's the routine. That's the system that we're using for the first cycle. Okay, So day 1 we squat, we bench. Day 2 we deadlift and overhead press, and day 3 it's bench and squat. So we squat twice a week, bench twice a week, and deadlift once a week, and a strict overhead press once a week. So that's a pretty good routine. Deadlifting more than once a week for a more advanced lifter or an intermediate lifter could be quite taxing on your central nervous system and quite draining in terms of creating a large amount of unnecessary fatigue. There's enough volume here to stimulate a strength adaptation. Plus, with all the additional accessory exercises, that also works, and also squatting helps your deadlift as well. So there we go. We only deadlift once a week. Now that's good for all the way from beginners up to more advanced lifters. Right, here we go. So week 1, 3 sets of 5. With that, we're going to do 65, 75, 85% of our training max, as you can see right here. We do 5 reps, and on the final set, you can do as many reps as possible if you feel like you've got it in the tank. But take into consideration with this, the first 2 training cycles, you are then going to do first set last for multiple sets. So it might be worth holding back on as many reps as possible on the third and final set for 85% of your training max. Instead, put your focus on this one right here, the first set last. Here you take the percentages that you use for your first set and you just do it last. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. You can do 3 to 5 sets for 5 to 8 reps. Take about 2 minutes rest between each one. You don't have to finish all 5 sets, and you don't have to do 8 reps for each set in between that range. What this does is it makes up for the common criticism of Jim Wendler training programs, that it lacks volume. You can't complain about that now, because this has really spiked the volume. And there we go. So it's really that simple. There's not much to it. It's not advanced mathematics and aerodynamics. Bench press, same principle. You do your warm-up, and then you do 3 sets of 5, 65, 75, 85% of your TM. And you do 3 sets of 5. The final set, you can do as many reps as possible, and then you do your first set last for 3 to 5 sets for 5 to 8 reps. Assistance work, there's 3 exercises. Now, the assistant work is consistent for each training cycle. As you can see, you do the same one for each week. The exercises don't change, but when you go to the next training cycle, we do change the exercises. And as you can see, we do alternate between them. It's good to do that, otherwise it gets a bit boring and monotonous. We've got the weighted dips, the leg press, and the leg extension. Now, you might not want to do all 3. You might want to just do 1 or 2, up to you. So, there we go. Day 2 is the same principle. We do your warm-up, 3 sets of 5. You got your first set last, overhead press, same concept, and then you finish with the assistance exercises. I always do my assistance exercises at the end of the workout, not in between each main lift. That's not a good idea. Okay, some people I've met have done that. It's not a good idea. These are not key, detrimental, important factors of your training program, assistance work. It is exactly what they are in the title, assisting your main lifts. Okay, there we go. So you move on to week 2. 3 sets of 3, as you can see. This time we're doing 70, 80, 90% of our TM. We're doing it for 3 reps instead of 5. And on the same principle, you can do as many reps as you like on the final third working set. Don't forget your warm-ups. But if this doesn't quite work for you and you feel like this is going to affect you being able to do a minimum of 3 sets of 5 on the first set last, then don't do that. As you can see, this time the percentage is 70% instead of 65% for first set last, because this is the first set weight percentages. You follow the same training routine. Squat bench Monday, deadlift overhead press day 2, which could be Wednesday. Day 3, you bench and squat, which could be Friday. The assistance exercises remain the same. You can increase, you can keep the weight the same, or you could reduce the weight, depending on how you're feeling. Nothing changes there, 3 sets of 3. And then we come to week 3, which is a little bit more complicated than the other 2. This time we're doing 75, 85, 95% of our training max, TM. And you're going to do first set last. Now, here's something I must address. Some people tell me they don't want to do this for week 3 because they don't want to do first set last because they're going to be a bit fatigued, a bit tired for the next exercise or the next training session. And here you kind of want to determine what your new max is, your new training max will be. So if you don't want to do all of these, if you don't want to do all of the first set lasts, first set lasts, that's fine. Just don't do it, okay? Quite simple. Let me just adjust that. That's going to bug me. There's a slight error with my... I will fix that later, but for some weird reason, I really do sometimes absolutely despise Excel. I'll come back to that later. So 3 sets of 5, 5 sets of 5 to 8 reps. Now, 5, 3, 1. What do you do here? You do 5 reps for the first one, no additional as many reps as possible. You do 3 reps for the second set, again, no as many reps as possible. But on the third and final set, you see the plus symbol for all of these exercises. What do you do here? Now, for the squat on the bench, you only do as many reps as possible on day 1, okay? You don't do it on day 3, and I'll explain why. Because we use this 1+ to determine what our new training max will be, our new 1 rep max will be for the next cycle, if we need to increase it or keep it the same. So you don't need to do that 2 times for this training week. So you don't need to do it on day 1 and day 3. You only need to do it on day 1 for the squat and the bench. So just to remind you, I'm going to take that off now. I had to keep the plus on there just to remind myself to address that issue. So you don't do that for the day 3. So now you're going to ask me, how do I determine if I should increase my 1 rep max based on what I did on this third and final set for all these exercises, the 4 main lifts? Right, we come back to the intro sheet. You can see here, if you do 0 reps, you don't add any weight to your 1 rep max. Okay, you haven't achieved even the bare minimum. If you do 1 to 2 reps, I normally add about 5 pounds to the squat or the deadlift, which is 2.5 kg. Now, for the overhead press and the bench, if I do 1 to 2 reps, I'll add 2.2 pounds, which is about 1.25 kilograms, or maybe 1 kilogram. Now, if I do more than 3 reps, I will add about 10 pounds to my squat and the deadlift, and 5 pounds to my overhead press and bench press, which is 2.5 kilograms, 10 pounds is 5 kilograms. That's what I would advise that you do. And once you've achieved this week, you've completed this week, you then prepare yourself for the next training cycle. So what you might want to do, depending on how well you did on the 1+ set, is increase your 1 rep max, and it will adjust your training max automatically. If you were not able to really do any reps, or maybe 1, but let's say you did just 1 rep for the third and final set, 1 set of 1+, and it was a real grinder 1 rep, then you probably just want to keep it the same and not adjust anything from your first training cycle maxes. You probably just want to keep it the exact same. That's not really a good sign that you've made a sufficient strength adaptation to start increasing your maxes. So cycle 2 is the exact same as the first cycle, except for the assistance exercises have changed. Nothing else is different there. Everything I just explained for the first cycle applies to the second cycle. When you get to your third training cycle, things have changed now. We have mixed up the 5-3-1 to 3-5-1. So the first week, in this instance week 8, we do 3 sets of 3. Week 9 we do 3 sets of 5, and then we do the 5-3-1. So we've just mixed things up a little bit here. That is the only thing that's changed here. The second thing that's changed is with the first set last. This time, instead of doing multi first set last, as in you do 3 to 5 sets of 5 to 8 reps, you just do 1 set for as many reps as possible, using the weight that you used for the first working set. That's the only difference with that. The fact that the assistance exercises have changed, we've changed the routine from 5-3-1 to 3-5-1, and we're not doing multi-sets anymore, we're doing 1 set of as many reps as possible. But everything else remains the same principle applies. So once you've finished that, again, same principle applies. You might want to increase your 1 rep max based on what you did on week 3 for the 1+ set, or you might want to keep it the exact same. Potentially you might want to reduce it if you feel like you are no longer even able to achieve these 1 rep maxes. But if that's the case, then you've clearly done something wrong during this program, Or potentially you haven't taken your recovery days to be used as recovery days. Instead, you've gone to the gym and you've done other stuff like prowler sled work or high intensity interval training, or you've done additional weightlifting. That's a common mistake I notice. People ask me, "Oh, John, I've gone backwards. What happened?" And I say, "Well, what did you do on your recovery days?" "Oh, I did some runs and I also did some hypertrophy training." I was like, "Well, that's not the purpose of your recovery days. You might want to do a brisk light walk on the treadmill or go for a walk around your local neighborhood to get some fresh air, keep relatively fit. But on those recovery days, they are used for recovery. That's why they're called recovery days, not I'll do some exercising because I can't stop going to the gym. They're not called that." So there we go. Right, and for the fourth cycle, you do the same as you did for the third cycle, 3-5-1. Again, everything's the exact same as the third cycle. Nothing's changed here. It's the same routine, same format, same everything. So now you've finished the program, right? That's it. Done. Dusted. Simple as. So a couple of questions, and then we'll move on to the next program. So the first thing I get asked is about deload weeks. Why is there no deload weeks? Well, in this instance, I've kind of just assumed, well, there is one deload week actually. That's a slight lie. You can see here I've included for week 7 on cycle 2 a deload week. But I haven't done it for any other of the training weeks. Now, if you so wish to, you can, at the end of week 10, which is the third cycle, take a recovery week. Just apply the same theory as you did here for the deload week on the second cycle. Only do the warm-up set weights, 40, 50, 60%. Okay? For this, with the same routine, squat, bench day 1, deadlift, overhead day 2, bench, squat day 3, same routine, but instead of doing any working sets, you just use the weight you did for the warm-up set, and you can just do these assistance exercises. Just keep them the same. But the reason why I haven't included that in here, but I might include it now that I'm thinking about it and make it a 14-week program. The reason why is because every time I've introduced this program to someone, they actually, 90% of them, with the exception of one person, didn't need to take a deload week at the end of week 10. So he didn't need to put week 11 here, the end of the third cycle, didn't need to put a deload week in there. He was just on a roll. He only needed one deload week during the 4 training cycles. Just worked. Because that 90% of them have that situation. Just one person that I've recommended this training program to has had to take an additional deload week. And the reason being was because this individual decided to not use recovery days as recovery days. And when I reviewed his training log, he actually added a 4th day in for some of the weeks. So he did an additional deadlift and overhead press session. So what he did was on Monday, I've said he now, so I've given that away. On Monday, he did the squat bench. On Wednesday, he did the deadlift overhead. Friday, he did the bench and squat. And then on Saturday, he did deadlift and overhead press again. That worked for the first training cycle. It kind of worked for the second training cycle. But when he got to the end of the third cycle, he was wrecked, totally fatigued, blown out. He overkilled, did too much. So that was the only incident I've ever come across where someone needed to add an additional deload week. But what I will do, because I'm a kind guy, is when I upload this spreadsheet onto my website, which you can download, I will put in a deload week here at the end of the third cycle, but I will make it optional for those who wish to do it. And that's it. That's the only thing I need to discuss. So let's move on to the next training program. Time to look at the next training program. So it's the beginner pyramid. Now, why is it called the pyramid? Quite simple. Have a look at this table right here. What we do is we start and finish with the same weight that we used for the first set and the final set. So instead of the traditional 3 sets now, we are now doing 5 sets. It goes 65, 75, 85, and then back down the pyramid, 75, 65. So we finish on the same weight we started with. That's why it's called pyramid training, because it creates that kind of pyramid concept. Very simple, incredibly simple. So, same concept as the other training programs. We always do our warm-up routine, which is 40, 50, 60% of our training max. Remember, we use training max, we do not use our 1 rep max. In this instance, in the 3-day-a-week schedule, we do squat, bench day 1, deadlift overhead day 2, bench squat again on day 3. We have three assistance exercises. You can choose one if you want. If you're a bit tired, you can do 2, you can do all 3, up to you. You can even change them if you don't like these ones. So week 1, we do the 65, 75, 85% of our TM. Okay, that's what we do. But then instead of stopping there, maybe doing the first set last or as many reps as possible set for the 4th set, we actually do 2 additional sets for 75% and 65%. Very simple. Same principle applies for the day 2 and day 3. Nothing changes. We then go to week 2. We do the 3 sets of 3 concept where we do 70, 80, 90% of our training max. Then instead of stopping there, we go back down the pyramid and do 80, 70%, starting with the weight and the percentages, finishing with the percentages and weight we started with. As you can see right there. Simple as. You do that the same for all the main lifts. The assistance exercises are the same as week 1. You can either increase, decrease, or keep the weight the same for those assistance exercises. Week 3, things are slightly different. Okay, we do the 5-3-1 this time. Now, here's where things get a little bit more trickier. We still do our warm-up routine. We do 1 set of 5 for the first one, 1 set of 3 for the second one, and 1 set of 1 for the 3rd set. And then we do the pyramid 85-75. So we finish with the same weight we started with. Now, what is this 1 plus? Why is that important? In this instance, it's very important because this really determines whether you increase the weight for the next training cycle or you keep it the same. Okay, how do we know that? Well, it says plus there, so we're going to do as many reps as we possibly can with good form and good technique. So, if you are able to do 0 reps, you do not change the weight for the following training cycle. Keep the 1 rep maxes the same. If you do 1 to 2, you add 5 pounds for the squat and deadlift. If you do 1 to 2 for the overhead or the bench, you add 2.2 pounds, about 1 to 1.25 kg. If you do more than 3, you add 10 pounds to your squat and your deadlift, which is 5 kg. If you do more than 3 for your overhead and your bench, you add 5 pounds, which is 2.5 kg. Boom. Easy. Just be conservative with that. Don't try and overdo it. And then once you've finished that week, okay, just make note here that when we come to do day 3, the bench and the squat, we do not do the 1 plus. Okay, we don't need to do that twice a week for those exercises. You only need to do it once a week. There we go. Then you do a deload week, and then you begin your second training cycle. Everything's the same. Nothing's changed except for your assistance exercises are now different. Okay, that is the only variation between cycle 1 and cycle 2 here. As I said before, let me make sure I make note of this. For the final week, 5-3-1, for the squat and the bench, you do not need to do 1 plus for day 3. You only need to do that on day 1. Everything else, completely the same. That's why this is a really cool training program for someone who just wants a quick workout, not overthinking anything, just 7 weeks, possibly 8 weeks if you want to just take a deload week at the end of week 7 right here. Boom, easy as pie. So there we go. That's all I need to talk about with that one. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, let's get started with the 5-3-1 for powerlifting. So this is a good program for powerlifters, maybe more sort of beginner, intermediate lift or intermediate powerlifters. First thing, into your 1 rep maxes in the yellow highlighted cells. It will adjust the TMs accordingly, 90% of your 1 rep max. Then go to rounding, 2.5 for kg, 5 for pounds. Once you've done that, you can begin the program. So, pretty simple. I won't mention it more than once. We always do our warm-up routine with the percentages of 40, 50, 60% of our training max. Then we begin our working set. Okay, in this instance, we're going to do the program a slightly different way. We start with 3 sets of 3, second week 3 sets of 5, and then week 3, 5-3-1. So we just mix those week 1 and week 2 around there. So week 1, we do squat, bench, day 1, day 2, deadlift, overhead, day 3, bench, squat. Okay, so let's talk about the routine structure. So we've got 3 sets of 3. That's what we're working with when we start, 70, 80, 90% of our training max. Then for the squat on day 1, we actually hit a heavy single on our final set, which is the weight of our training max. Okay, so that's what that weight is. It's the weight of our training max, which in this instance is 170 kilograms. Okay, then the bench press, we do the usual warm-up routine. Then we do our 3 sets of 3, 70, 80, 90% of our training max. But this time, instead of doing 1 heavy single of our TM, we're going to do the first set last. We're going to take the weight we did for the first set, in this instance 70%. I'm going to do 1 set for as many reps as possible. Boom. Then you can do your assistance work. If you so wish to, you could do 1, you could do 2, you could do all 3, depending on what your energy levels are. Always do the assistance work at the end of the exercise, not in between your main lifts. The deadlift, day 2, we do our usual warm-up routine. We do 70, 80, 90% for 3 sets of 3. Then we hit our heavy single with our weight, the weight that is our TM for the deadlift. 1 set, 1 rep, go for it. Really give yourself a little bit of a break between the final working set, 1 set 3, and this heavy TM set. Same applies for all of them. Maybe 3 to 5 minutes. And also, if you're going to do this one, what I would recommend and probably do myself is wear my lifting belt, and possibly, if it was a squat, I would use my knee wraps. I probably would not use the bar straps if I was a raw powerlifter for this heavy TM. I would use just chalk and my natural grip. And I wouldn't really wear a singlet. If it was for the bench, I'd use my wrist wraps as well, just to protect my wrists. The overhead press, same thing. 3 sets of 3, you're going to do as your working set, 70 and 90. Then you're going to hit your heavy one heavy single with the weight that is your TM for the overhead press. Then you do your assistance work. Day 3 is the bench day and the squat day. Here you are going to do, for the bench press, you're going to do 3 sets of 3, but this time, unlike what we did on Monday, you're going to do 1 set for 1 rep with your weight that is the TM weight stated up here, which in this instance is 135. Again, I'd probably use my belt and my wrist wraps for this, just to make sure that I'm with it, because it's kind of pretty close to, it is maximal load, it's 90% of your 1 rep max. You probably want to make sure you've got your lifting gear on for this one. Squat, you're going to do your usual warm-up routine, 3 sets of 3, 70, 80, 90, and then you're going to do 1 additional set. This time, instead of what we did on Monday where we did 1 heavy single with our TM, this time we're going to do 1 set, as many reps as possible, using the weight we used for our first set, which is 70% of our training max, in this instance 120. Then your assistance work. Right, week 2, 3 sets of 5 this time instead of 3 sets of 3. We've backed off on the intensity. It's now 65, 75, 85 instead of 70, 80, 90. So it's slightly lighter, but more volume. 3 sets of 5 instead of 3 sets of 3. But this time we are not going to do any additional work. We're not going to do first set last, and we're not going to do TM training. This is kind of your back off week in between week 1 and week 3, where you're using heavier weights. You want to try and reduce the intensity for this. So it's kind of like a break in between the 2 heavier weeks. Everything's the same for day 1, day 2, day 3, same percentages, same rep schemes, and the assistance work is the same as what you did for week 1. So you might want to increase the weight for these assistance exercises, you might want to reduce it, you might want to do the same, whatever you want. It's assistance work, it's not compulsory important stuff necessarily. So week 3 is the heavier week, where we're going to do our warm-up routine. We're going to do 75, 85, 95% of our training max. My apologies. And here's where it gets interesting. I'm going to go up. We're going to hit that 95% of our TM. What you want to do here is go for as many reps as you possibly can in this instance. Okay, let me just adjust something accordingly. So you want to chase as many reps as possible. Now the reason being is because that will determine really how well your strength adaptations are. If you've made any sort of strength adaptation during this 3-week period. Okay, probably some people might not be able to do that. Some people will just achieve 1 rep. You know what? Some people might not get any reps. Most people, if you've done this training program properly so far, you have taken your rest days for recovery and not doing additional exercise, you're easily going to be able to do 1 rep minimum. Okay, so ideally you want to try and get to 3 reps on this 1+. Now, unlike some of the other programs where we use this to then determine what we're going to be doing for the second cycle or part 2, we're not doing that for this program. Simply because we are working with a lot of heavier weight for this one. We're doing frequent 90% for 1 heavy single on a weekly basis. So we're going to keep the weight the same for part 1 and part 2 of this program. We're not going to change our 1 rep maxes for the second part of the program. But go for whatever you can on this, and then in the comment section when you get home, just make sure you make note of how many reps you did. Okay, just write in there whatever you did, whatever was the number of reps. Let's say, for example, you did 8 reps. No, you wouldn't do 8 reps, maybe 5 reps. And then you do the exact same thing for, don't forget also after you've done that, you're going to do your TM as well. So you're going to do your heavy one set of 1 at 90%, which is your TM. So that's something else that you need to take into consideration after you've finished this one. Then you can do the bench press, and you can do the same thing, warm up, and then you do your 3 working sets, 5, 3, 1. The final set, you go for as many reps as possible, and don't forget for your own to just make note of these things for your own personal record, so you can measure your growth whilst using this program. Just say how many reps you did there. Now, instead of doing TM for 1 set 1, this time you're going to do 1 set for 5 to 8 reps at 75% of your training max. First set last. Simple. Then you can do your assistance work. Right, day 2, we are going to do similar to what we did for the squat on day 1. We do warm up, 75, 85, 95% of our TM, 5 reps, 3 reps, and then we do the 1 plus. So you go for as many reps as you possibly can, and then make sure to state in your comment section here how many reps you did, so you can monitor your growth and development using this program. Overhead press, this time we are going to do 40 our warm-up routine, 75, 85, 95% of our TM, and we're going to do 5, 3, 1. Don't forget, for the 1 plus, you chase as many reps as you possible, and just write when you get home after you've done your workout how many reps you did on that 1 plus set. Then you do your heavy TM set, and then you do your assistance work. Day 3, we are going to do the bench. We'll start off with the bench. We're going to do 5, 3, 1 again for our working sets, 75, 85, 95%. This time we're not going to do 1 plus because we've already done that once during the week. We don't need to do it again. We did it on Monday. So you're just going to do 1 rep there at 95%. And then you do your TM, which is for 1 set, 1 rep. And the same applies for your squat, but in this case, instead of doing your TM work like you've got here for the bench, you do 1 set, 5 to 8 reps using the weight you use for your first working set. And then you do your assistance work. Right, we're getting there. And then you take a deload week. Okay, this is week, same as all deloads. Just do the weights that you use, the percentages you use for your warm-ups. 40, 50, 60%, 3 sets of 5, keep the weight light, keep it low intensity, low volume. Don't overthink this one. 3 sets of 5 is enough. And then just do some very light, easy assistance work. Right, part 2 is the next part of this program. It's the same structure as what you did with part 1. 3 sets 3, 3 sets 5, 5, 3, 1. There's just a few variations. But week 1, it's all the same as what we did above. Nothing's changed there. Same structure as what we did for week 1. Week 2, same as what we did for part 1 in part 2. It's the same structure, same concept. Nothing's changed there, except for what we're doing now. We are still doing the same assistance exercises. You might want to change that potentially to mix things up a bit, but we'll talk about that later. And then we come to the 5, 3, 1 plus TM at as many reps as possible. This is week 3. This is where things slightly differ from the part 1 section. Okay. We are going to do a warm-up routine, 3 working sets. Same principle applies as what we did in part 1. On that 1 set for 1 plus, do as many reps as you possibly can, okay? And just make sure that you state how many reps you actually did, just so you can track your progress. The next one is as many reps as possible at your training max weight. In this instance, we know that's 170 because it's up here. And you go for as many reps as possible. AMRAP stands for as many reps as possible. For the bench press, you're going to do your warm-up and then your working sets, 5, 3, 1. Don't forget on the 1 plus, the final working set here, you do the exact same thing as you'd previously have done. You go for as many reps as you possibly can with that weight, maintaining good form technique, and make sure your reps are not, the bar's not dipping, that it's good form, good technique, and then just write how many reps you actually did. For the final work, the final thing that you're doing for this bench routine here, you're going to do first set last for 1 set as many 5 to 8 reps in this instance. Okay, so that's using the weight you use for the first working set. You can do that for your last working set here, and you're going to do 1 set for anywhere from 5 to 8 reps, no more, no less. And then you do your assistance work. Come to day 2, it's the deadlift day. Warm-up routine as always. 75, 85, 95%. Same principle applies. 1 plus, write how many reps you did. Boom, done. And then you're going to finish it with as many reps as possible at your TM weight. In this instance, it's 225, 1 set. But instead of doing just 1 rep, you're going to go for as many reps as possible. Now, similar here, just make sure that you write how many you actually did, so you can kind of keep track of that as well, how many reps you actually did on that TM at as many reps as possible. I'll just put 1 there for now. Right, same principle applies for the overhead press. Warm up, 3 sets of 3, 1 plus, go for as many reps as you possibly can, and then just to keep track of how many reps you did, make sure you write in the comments. TM at as many reps as possible. Again, go for as many reps as you can with the weight, your TM weight, and then just write when you get home how many you actually did there. I've kept it at 1 for now. Day 3, we do our warm-up routine, 75, 85, 95% of our TM for our working sets, 5, 3, 1. This time you don't need to do the 1 plus because we've already done that for the bench down here on day 1, but you still need to do the TM at as many reps as possible, 1 set, and at 135 in this instance, and don't forget to write how many you actually did there once you get home and update your spreadsheet. Squat, this time we do your warm-up, your working sets, 5, 3, 1, and then for the final working set of the day, for the squat, you can do 75% the weight you use for your first working set, and you do 1 set anywhere to 5 to 8 reps, and then you do your assistance work, and you're done. Job done. Easy peasy. Not too difficult of a program compared to some others I've reviewed. So there we go. The program review is done for this one. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so now let's have a look at the powerlifting variation of 531. So we've already looked at the 531 PL, which is more, I would say, better suited. This one right here, better suited for possibly a beginner powerlifter or sort of intermediate level powerlifter. I'd say this one probably is better suited to a more of an advanced powerlifter because we're doing quite a few cycles here. We're working in training cycles. We've got 3 training cycles. We are frequently reviewing and adapting our 1 rep max at the end of each cycle. And there's a little bit more going on in this program than the other one, the 531 for PL. So let's talk about it. So it's quite straightforward. Instead, this time we are not doing 3 sets of 5, 3 sets 3, 5, 3, 1. We're actually flipping around week 2 and week 1. So we do 3 sets of 3 for week 1, and we do 3 sets of 5 for week 2. But we still do 5, 3, 1 in week 3. So that's one of the key differences here. The percentages are still the same. It is a 4-day training program, this one. We strict overhead press on Monday, we deadlift Tuesday, bench Thursday, squat Friday. That's the routine that we're doing here. We've got quite a few assistance exercises. We do less assistance exercises on the sort of core lower body days. So that would be the Tuesday and the Friday. We're focusing less on that. And on the Monday and Thursday, on the pressing days, we can do a little bit more assistance work. So as you can see here, we do 3 sets of 3 on the final working set on week 1. We do plus, which means that we do as many as we can. We do more than 3 if we can do more than 3. So let's move on to week 2. It's 3 sets of 5. So we start with a heavy week 1. We back off to a lighter week for week 2, and then we come back to a heavy week on week 3. That's the theory of why we're doing it in this order now. So here the percentages have obviously slightly gone down, 65, 75, 85. Week 1 was 70, 80, 90%, so you can see percentages have been reduced. And we do 3 sets of 5 for our working sets, plus symbol implies that we go for as many as we can on that last one. Same principle applies for the assistance work. We do more on day 1 and day 3, less on day 2 and day 4, because they're a little bit more taxing day 2 and day 4 than day 1 and day 3. And then we come to the final training session before a deload week, 5-3-1. If you haven't watched my previous videos, let me explain how this works. So we do our usual warm-up routine, 40, 50, 60% of our training max. Then we jump in, 75, 85, 95%. We do 75 for 5, 85 for 3. And then on the final set, we're doing 95% of our training max for as many reps as possible. Now this is important. How many reps you do on this final third set here for just one set of 1+ determines whether you should increase the weight for the next training cycle or keep it the same, and by how much weight you should increase. So it's important that you make note of this once you've completed it. So must remember, again, just stress this every time I talk about one of these training programs. We're working off what they call the TM, not the 1 rep max. Training max, TM stands for training max. That's 90% of your 1 rep max, or potentially 85% if you're more an advanced lifter. And do remember to change to 2.5 if you're doing kg up here. So let's talk about that third and final week, the 1 set of 1+ rep. Now, if you do 0 on that, don't change the weight, your 1 rep max, for the next training cycle. If you do potentially 1 to 2, you might want to add about 5 pounds to your squat and deadlift, that's 2.5 kg, or 2.2 pounds, which is about 1 to 1.25 kg maybe, for your bench or your overhead press. Now, if you do more than 3, I would say you add about 10 pounds to your squat or your deadlift, that's 5 kg, and 5 pounds to your overhead press and your bench press, that's 2.5 kg. Some people have said, well, what happens if I did like 10 reps? Well, firstly, that would be pretty commendable. Secondly, I really don't think you should be adding more than 10 pounds for the squat deadlift or 5 pounds for the overhead press and bench press. I think really that's the maximum you need to do. Considering these cycles, you've only got 3 working weeks and then 1 deload week each cycle. That's not a lot of time to make humongous jumps in 4 weeks. I think adding 10 pounds in 4 weeks to your max, your 1 rep max, is pretty damn good. So I would take that and run with it. So there we go, and then we do a deload week, which is the final week 4 here. We just do the weights, percentages we do for warm-up, 40, 50, 60% of our training max for 5 reps, and 3. And we do that for the 4 main lifts, and just a little bit of light assistance work, but nothing too intense. Right, cycle 2. Again, if you have managed to do some pretty good numbers on these final sets on week 3, then you might be changing these right here. You might be changing your 1 rep max, or potentially you might be keeping it the exact same. So it's still the same, 3 sets 3, 3 sets 5, 5, 3, 1. Percentages all remain the same as what we just did in cycle 1, except we're just doing this for a second cycle now, with potentially slightly more weight, or just the same. The assistance work has changed. We're not doing the exact same routine as we did for cycle 1. That's one of the bigger variations. But everything else in theory is the same as cycle 1. And again, what weight you do, that's going to bug me if that square's not even. One thing. Basically whatever you do on this final set on week 3 for 1 set of 1+ will then determine whether for the third cycle you should keep the weight the same or slightly increase it. By how much should you do? Depends on how many reps you do on that third and final set on week 3. There we go. So then we come to the third and final training cycle. Okay, again, everything's still the same. We start with 3 sets 3, week 1, 3 sets 5, week 2, 5, 3, 1, week 3. All the same. The accessory assistance exercises, my apologies, has changed. It's not the same as cycle 2, but everything else is the exact same, the routine. So 4 weeks, 1 training cycle, same as the first 2, and you deload in week 4. Now here's the question I get asked a lot: should I chase a new 1 rep max? Kind of like you're peaking for a competition. You want to try what you would open with and what you'd do for your second and third attempt. For a competition, should you chase that? That's a good idea. Maybe take the deload week. You might want to take this week, this third cycle deload week, just do nothing, literally just rest and recover, and then come back for the 5th week on that training cycle and then test your 1 rep max, just to give yourself a little bit of a rest after this more intensive week 3. Take a week off, then chase a 1 rep max. That's how you could apply this. So there we go. That's the fantastic powerlifting variation program. So hope you enjoy that. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, it's time to do the boring but big training variations. Now I'll try and keep this a little bit shorter. I'm not going to go into extensive detail for each one because they are all quite similar. So we do the basic Jim Wendler thing. Week 1, 3 sets 5, week 2, 3 sets 3, week 3, 5, 3, 1. That's the same. Same concept. Warm up 40-60% of your TM training max. Remember, we use training max, not 1 rep max. Then you do your work in 3 sets, which could either be 3 sets 5, 3 sets 3, or 5, 3, 1. Quite simple. On the final third working set, you go for as many reps as possible. That's what the plus symbol means. But what makes this different, the BBB programs, is you are now going to do something a little bit boring, which is just 5 sets of 10 for a fixed percentage, which is 65% week 1, 70% week 2, 75% week 3. Not too over the top, incredible, mind-blowing training concepts here, which is why it's quite boring. And then we do our assistance work. You could do 1, you could do 2, you could do all 3, or you could do none of them if you feel fatigued and tired and burnt out. Especially considering you're going to be doing 5 sets of 10 after you do your 3 sets of 5, or 3 sets of 3, 5, 3, 1. So that's something to take into consideration. So this time you're squatting twice a week, deadlifting twice a week, benching twice a week, strict overhead pressing twice a week. So there's a lot of volume, a lot of frequency for the main lifts. That's why it's big. You're starting to understand why the title comes, where the title comes from. Week 2 is pretty much the same format. Instead of doing 3 sets of 5, you do 3 sets of 3. The percentage has changed from 65 to 70, but the rep scheme remains the same, 5 sets of 10. The accessory exercises have remained the same. Again, you can choose to do 1 or all 3, 2, or none of them. Nothing really to report there, nothing mind-blowing. And then week 3, you do 5, 3, 1. You remember you do the 1 plus on the final set. That will definitely be something you don't want to skip. That's going to give you an indication of how much you've developed during this very short training cycle. And instead of doing 70%, you do 75% for 5 sets 10. That's 75% your TM, not your 1 rep max. So in theory, it's 10. It's actually 65 or 60% of your 1 rep max in theory. So not much to say here. We squat, do the 5, 3, 1 day 1, bench day 2, deadlift day 3, strict overhead press day 4. What some people say to me is that the boring bit, which is the 5 sets of 10 for 75%, is a little bit too much on top of the 5, 3, 1, the more maximal effort loads. It can affect the next training session. So when you get to your deadlift on day 3, you might still be a bit fatigued from day 1. If that's something that you've experienced when you've done this cycle, you've repeated this program already once, then just don't do this section, the 5 sets of 10. Just take it out and just do the 5, 3, 1. Cycle 2, the exact same as cycle 1. Nothing has changed. The percentages are the same, the rep scheme's the same, everything's the same. So I don't need to repeat that for a second time. So just remember as well, there are drop-down options here for the boring section, the 5 sets of 10. You can choose a variation on the main lift, or you could do the main lift. That applies for the first and second cycle. Simple, done. So let's start the next one, which is the 6-week challenge. Let's have a look at this as an overview. So everything remains the same. We're still doing the 3 sets 5, 3 sets 3, 5, 3, 1, week 1, 2, and 3. We've got 2 training cycles, but the BBB section is slightly different. Week 1 to week 2, we do 50% of our TM. Week 3 and week 4, we do 60%, and week 5 and week 6, we do 70%. Except for that, nothing else has changed from variation 1. It's all the exact same. Okay, and again, you can choose to do a drop down variation, or you can do the main lift in its basic form. Nothing else has changed. So again, it's just another variation on the boring but big concept. You can do that, you can do 1, you can do 2, this one, the 6-week challenge, or you could do this one, slightly more complex 13-week challenge. Okay, this is good fun. This one is different. It is not the same as the last one. Now here, let's have a look at the overview of the program. Pretty simple, but more complicated than the first two. Okay, week 1, week 2, we do 50% at 5 sets of 10. Week 3, week 4, we do 60% at 5 sets of 10. Week 5, week 6, we do 70% at 5 sets of 10. Week 7, we deload. And then week 8, we actually move to 3 sets of 5. 3 sets of 5. It says 3 sets. You do your 3 sets of 5, and then you do your 5 sets of 5 at 80%. You do 5 sets of 5 at 80% again on week 9. Week 10 and week 11, you do 5 sets of 3 at 90%. Week 12, week 13, you do 5 sets of 1 at your training max. So as you can see, it's not so boring. It's just but big. Okay, this gets a little bit more complicated and a bit more engaging, rather than just doing 5 sets of 10 and going up by 5% or 10% on a weekly basis. This one is good fun. I like this program. It's probably my favorite out of all the variations. But the same training concept applies as we look down for the 5-3-1 section, the main Jim Wendler concept. We're doing week 1, 3 sets of 5, week 2, 3 sets of 3, week 3, we are doing 5-3-1. Now for the whole 13 weeks, you keep your training max and your 1 rep max all the same. That never changes for the full 13 weeks. Don't forget you've got the deload week in week 7, so don't skip that. I highly advise that you do that. But with exception to that, not much else has changed from the previous one, except now we are doing 13 weeks. And as you can see with the boring section, the BBB section, the percentages are changing. They're varying on each training cycle. You can see that as you scroll down, and that's the only difference from the first two. Pretty much everything else remains the same. So this is a good program. I recommend it. Give it a go. Now the boring but big standard version, this one is probably the most simplest of them all in terms of the boring but big section. In the first training cycle, everything's the same. We're doing 3 sets of 5, 3 sets of 3, 5-3-1, 1-2, week 1, 2, and 3. That's one training cycle done. Then you take a deload at the end of that. You go to cycle 2, you do that again, 3 sets of 5, 3 sets of 3, 5-3-1. Week 8, take a deload. And then you do your third cycle, same thing, 3 sets of 5, 3 sets of 3, 5-3-1. Week 12, take a deload. So that's all the same as the other ones, except for I put a bit more deloading in this one. This one could be good for someone who tends to struggle with fatigue management and tends to find themselves burning out quite quickly. Take it on a case-by-case people. Sometimes I train some people and they can literally hit sub-maximal, maximal loads on a weekly basis for up to 10 to 12 weeks, completely natural, but they just got that genetics, they got the youth, they're just built for it, they can handle it. I've got other people I train, no, can't do that at all. They'll burn out within 2 weeks. So it's on a case-by-case person's. So this program could be good for someone like that. So the percentages for this one, you go for cycle 1, 50% at 5 sets of 10. So you're starting at quite a low percentage, which is why this would be good for someone who struggles with fatigue management, central nervous system fatigue, peripheral nervous system fatigue, really experiencing those sluggish sessions. And if that's something that you suffer with, then this could be a good program for you. And then cycle 2, we do 60% for 5 sets of 10. Cycle 3, we do 70% for 5 sets of 10. But it's the same as the other ones. It's a 4-day a week training program, but you do three cycles here. You've got more deload weeks, and the percentages remain consistent for each training cycle. So cycle 1 is 50%, cycle 2 is 60%, cycle 3 is 70%. There we go. Now, another variation here is that we do actually change the training max and 1 rep max on a weekly, on a site each training cycle. So as you can see here, we got another one. Each time we do a training cycle, after the first one, after the second one, we've got a new section to input a new 1 rep max. So how do we know whether we should or how much we should increase it by? Well, if you've watched the other videos, you already know this. If you haven't, then you don't know that. It all depends on what you do on this +1 session right here on week 3. So that 1+ set determines whether you should or should not, or how much you should add to your 1 rep max for the following training cycle. Let's go all the way back to the beginning, to our intro section, and have a look at that. So if you do 0 reps on that, don't add any weight to your 1 rep max for the next training cycle. That applies for all the lifts, main lifts. If you do 1 to 2, then you probably want to add about 5 pounds to your squat or deadlift. That's about 2.5 kg. Or for the overhead or the bench, you do about 2.2 pounds, maybe about 1 to 1.25 kg. If you do more than 3, you probably want to add about 10 pounds to your squat or your deadlift, which is about 5 kilograms, or you could do 5 pounds to your overhead press and bench, which is 2.5 kilograms. Those are sensible numbers, sensible increases. That's my advice. I advise that you do take that. So again, that's how you determine whether you should or shouldn't add, or how much you should add to the new section for the new training cycle, after cycle 1 and after cycle 2. There we go. Simple as that. So there we go. I hope I explained them all okay. If you have questions, you can comment below on the YouTube, or alternatively, you can contact me through Instagram and drop me a message and say you're struggling with something, and I'll try and get back to you as quick as I can. So let's move on to the next one. So to summarize everything, let's just talk about a few key points with all these programs. First thing, remember, if there is a program where you increase the 1 rep max per training cycle, do be sensible and try to keep to my guideline here. Second thing, if you are an advanced lifter, you might want to use 85% instead of 90% for your training max. Next thing, don't forget to change it from 5 to 2.5 if you're working in kilograms. Second thing, if you miss a week, training week, if you miss a training session, if you are unable to complete the set out prescribed rep scheme for that session and you're missing reps, you're missing sets, you can do one or two things. What I recommend, firstly, you could just continue with that week and then repeat it the following week. So don't move on, just stick with that week again. If it's due to pretty bad fatigue, exhaustion, you're tired, then you might just want to take a week off or a deload week in between the week that you've just messed up on and the next session. That could be one or two options. Take it or leave it, up to you. And I'll make sure to write that right here for you to make note of. Now, which program's right for you depends on the individual, okay? Depends on who you are. Next thing, are these programs exactly the same as in Jim Wendler's book? No, not all of them are. They are kind of customized and tailored based on my recommendations and how I like to train, which is why they're called variants. They're variations on what Jim Wendler's set out and just how I like to train. So they're not exactly the same. If you want exactly the same, go buy his books. That's my advice. So there we go. Good luck with the programs. I wish you all the best. If you have any questions, comment below on YouTube or message me on Instagram. Thanks for buying the program, and I wish you all the best.